Okay, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I have the slide set? I don't see it up yet. Is it up on the screen?
It's coming shortly.
Okay, and will I have arrow control of it?
Would you prefer that? We can
Yeah,
do that.
because with the amount of time left, yeah, we'll have to
No,
go quickly. And I apologize. It worked when we tried the testing a few days ago, so I'm not sure what happened.
Go ahead and click on the PowerPoint, Kenneth, and then you'll be able to advance the slide with the
Okay.
PowerPoint, with the arrow keys.
Okay, so click on it and then there we go. Okay, and backwards, yeah, okay. So what I want to quickly talk about our current food system, because if we're going to talk about sustainable ag under climate change, we have to have a clear vision of where we are. Oh my gosh, 5 minutes. Well, you've heard it produces an adequate supply. And this is really quite an achievement for 8 billion people when you come to think of it. Still too many hungry people. You've heard about that. You haven't heard about the price spikes that are occurring at regular intervals. And you've heard about the enormous costs from environmental damage and unsustainable use of natural resources. And one of those unsustainable uses is cutting down native habitat. You have heard about that today. And in fact, we're expanding crop area for the major staple food crops. If you look on the left hand there, crop production area, since 2002 at about 12 million hectares per year. And after a period where it was very stable from 1980 to 2002. And those are just the major staples, of which rice, wheat, maize, and soybean at the bottom are 75%. Note that they come with their overlap with price spikes. So that's a price index where 100 was in 1980. And you see this past couple decades have seen violent price spikes that send signal to global markets about the need for more food and thus stimulate farmers to clear more land. By the way, we're in a price spike right now. You can look at it another way. Brown is bad, green is good. 1980 to 2002, most of the increase in production came from increased yields, the green, 1980 to 82. From 2002 to 2014, most of the increase come from expansion of crop area. So clearly not a sustainable track. Most countries rely on imports for their food demand. That's an important point. Billions of people rely on imports in today's world, and also dependent on a relatively number of crops produced in a few breadbasket regions. These are the breadbaskets. There are just a few in the world, and I won't go through them, but these are areas that produce enough surplus for export to feed international markets, to supply countries that don't produce enough. So what is sustainable agriculture under climate change? Sorry, I'm Russian. Well, it depends on your worldview, and I think this is really important. I call it one view, let's call the reducitarian. They believe that there are fatal flaws in our current system, not possible to correct without major overhaul of our systems. It thus requires new crops, new cropping systems, but also a large decrease in demand from putative changes in diets and putative reduced waste, for which, by the way, very little evidence that those occur. Another group I would call the producitarians. They would reject number one and say simply not enough time to develop new crops and cropping systems within a time frame that's relevant for mitigating or adapting to climate change. But they also believe that it's possible to improve existing systems to make them sufficiently productive, resilient, reliable, etc. So the point there is what you invest in research and development really depends on your worldview, whether you're in general terms on the polar extremes, reducitarians or producitarians. The good news is that regardless of worldview, the performance metrics that we've used to judge what a sustainable system is under climate change would be the same regardless of world view. And that we must, so what is that? We must have enough, the system must produce enough in terms of nutrients and energy for our human diets that's going to be 10 billion by mid-century or nearly. It must be affordable, available, accessible, and that the land use requirements for agriculture is going to have an enormous impact on the environmental quality of life, biodiversity, water quality, climate change. So therefore, minimizing expansion of area, crop area, and avoiding further conversion of land for crop production and livestock production is essential. You heard that from Dr. Law's talk. That means that this word eco-intensification, ecological intensification also holds true for both worldviews. And whether you're a producitarian or a reducitarian, you're going to have yields produced near yield potential levels on all existing farmland. That is to avoid expansion. You've heard it, you got to maintain soil quality, reduce negative impacts, environmental impacts below environmental thresholds for water quality, wildlife, biodiversity, global warming. And to do that, you need to substantially increase input efficiency. You heard that from Rattan Lal. But the point here is that these 2 points, the environmental thresholds and the use efficiencies for inputs, provide the metrics by which you can quantitatively judge and compare objectively systems that are within the producitarian worldview versus those that are proposed for the reducitarian worldview. And of course, all of this is necessary but not sufficient. You still need good governance, policies and regulations to make sure that if you produce more on less land, that you are indeed able to prevent expansion and destruction of natural habitat in converting to agriculture. Okay, so final thing I want to mention real here is who's responsible for achieving sustainable agriculture. And I guess, you know, there's no international food system governance, none on the horizon. So at the end of the day, it falls to a national governments. And I would propose that it's then very urgent that each country conduct a strategic assessment of future food supply options under climate change. And you need to know what your national food production potential is relative to your food requirements and your comparative advantage to produce them in terms of how much land it takes, that's yield, how much soil, how good your soils are, how much water you have, and what your climate is. This is especially important for food importing countries. So if we conduct these, there is good news. We've developed tools specifically to do that. And I ask you to look at the Global Yield Gap Atlas, where these methods have been developed and are robust enough to do a good job of it. Here's the point. You have to have methods that give you an answer that is robust enough and accurate enough that if you're a country that will be going into a food deficit because you're not able to produce enough for your expected population, you get that answer. If you got an answer that you can produce enough, you would be in a bad strait if you did not invest in harbors and roads and infrastructures that allow you to import food. So final question. Could Africa become the next breadbasket under climate change? They have enormous land area to do it, and land that is farmable in other countries with similar rainfall and soils. But the difference between Africa and the US Corn Belt is simply that it's a lot hotter, it's tropical, it has more rainfall, but the fact is, if you look at water balance in the middle there, you've got in sub-Saharan Africa, you've got more than double the evapotranspiration, which then means that your net water balance for crop production is much less than in the US Corn Belt, for example. And the soil depth, if you look at the bottom, soil depth is much less. So soils are shallower, don't store as much water, and therefore Sub-Saharan Africa cannot be the next breadbasket and will be actually a net importer of substantial amounts of food. But that's the importance of having a robust national assessment of future food security. So I want to conclude. Our global food system is not sustainable under current or future climates. Effective prioritization of research and development investments to achieve a sustainable agriculture under climate change depends on the worldview you have about the current system. And can present trajectories with regard to cropping systems and increasingly globalized trade be largely maintained, or does it require major overhaul? We have many existing emerging technologies. Dr. Lal talked about some of those, but we will need significant investment in research and development, and we'll need low-cost metrics to track progress towards sustainable agriculture. And the responsibility to achieve it falls to national scale. And I'm going to end there, and I apologize for the trouble.
Thank you, Professor Kasman. I'm sorry here you felt a bit rushed, but I'm so glad that you were able to at least share some of those ideas. I think we all can agree that our global food system is not sustainable at the moment, and we need to work to make it more sustainable. So with that, I leave everybody and say thank you to Professor Kasman. And we do have the next session just about to start. So the last sessions are about to start. So I'll see you in those sessions.